Hello and welcome to Tarim Talks. I'm your host, Babur Ilchi. Today I'm with Rayhan Asat, a Harvard lawyer who has recently founded ATILA, the American Turkic International Lawyers Association. She's also the host of the podcast Own My Currency and the chair of the Women's Entrepreneurship Board in Harvard. She has a website, Ishakeup.com, where she shares aspects of her life, her accomplishments, and also she's a dancer, specializing in hip-hop. Welcome to the show, Rayhan.
What an intro. Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be on your show.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, so I'm a lawyer, as you said, and I love pursuing my curiosity and having a love affair with it. And I am incredibly interested in entrepreneurship, especially exploring what makes people tick, what is the drive and unwavering determination behind someone's idea of building a company or a business or even nonprofit. But in addition to that, I do love dancing because I think that's what makes me alive and keep engaged with my creativity and gives me a lot of energy to stay active, as well as it's a nice way to get in touch with my creativity. So I could say I'm an entrepreneur, lawyer, and dancer.
Yeah, and I think it's important for everyone to have a bit of a creative outlet, no matter how you do it. It's just a way to express yourself in a way that's not traditional or conforms to societal norms, something a little different for yourself. So would it be fair to say that entrepreneurship makes you tick?
Both. Yeah, entrepreneurship as well as being a lawyer. And I mean, nowadays, especially the past few years, I explored the subject of entrepreneurship and took several courses at the Harvard Business School online. And that truly cultivated my interest in entrepreneurship. And perhaps being a lawyer, you do advise clients, especially as a corporate lawyer, business entities. So I think combination of both prompted my interest, and I think that's whole idea of like creating my own nonprofit originated.
And when you're talking about your own nonprofit, you are talking about ATILA?
Yes, indeed.
So I have to ask, how long did it take for you to come up with the order of the words to make sure that it says ATILA?
That's funny. I get asked this question a lot. In fact, when we had our inaugural event, the chief commercial counselor of Turkey was asking me the same question. And he said, this acronym, was it deliberate? And I said, absolutely yes. So, no, it didn't take me that long. But also I spent some time in Turkey. That's why, I want to create something that would resonate with people, and it's catchy title. And those of us who are students of history would immediately recognize the name.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the first things I noticed when I saw the name. For those of us who maybe don't know or aren't as well versed in what or who ATILA is, can you enlighten us a little?
So our acronym is ATILA, but historically there was a ruler who's called ATTILA, so ATILA as well. It's pronounced the same way, but he's the ruler of the Hun, right? ATILA the Hun, and he was a historical figure that goes back to I believe from 434. But at the same time, it also means I think in Turkish it's the father, the determined. So I like especially the idea of the determined. I want ATILA to be a place where determined change makers can um, gain friendships, and as well as find opportunities for their professional growth. So that meaning of ATILA truly resonated with me. And that's how I came up with ATILA. So it has multiple meanings. It's a beautiful way to celebrate our culture as well, entire Turkic culture.
Absolutely, yeah. It's definitely goes past the surface level. When I first saw it, I definitely thought it was just a catchy name. So with entrepreneurship, people tend to solve problems. What problem were you trying to solve with ATILA?
So in America, there are so many bar associations that are catered to a particular group. So for instance, we have the Asian American Bar Associations, we have a Southeast Asian Bar Association, American Korean Bar Associations, but there hasn't been one that catered to Turkic community. And compared to a lot of other ethnic groups like Iranian Americans, I think Turkic American groups are a relatively smaller group, but at the same time, together, we're considerable size. But I think the needs of that group are never catered to. So the idea of creating ATILA is to provide platform for lawyers of Turkic origin to thrive in their career, but at the same time engage with American lawyers so that we would have the chance to introduce our beautiful culture and form long-lasting relationships between lawyers. And oftentimes we can all say, oh, you don't have to belong somewhere. You don't have to pigeonhole yourself. But I think we all look for a sense of belonging. And when you are in an institution where it can provide you that platform, and especially as a law student, if you want to talk to somebody who you could look up to that had similar experience, and also understand the challenges that you have to go through as an immigrant or from your own cultural challenges as well, and having that cultural affinity, I think that's what ATILA is about. Just providing a platform even for law students to find their own mentors that understand their own upbringing and then provide more tailored solution to the problems or challenges and adversity that they're going through, right? So, and that was how it's created to meet the necessity and just to address the opportunity that presented itself that is completely untapped market in a business term.
I want to pivot a little bit to your website because while we're still on the topic of entrepreneurial ideas or ventures, you also created Ishakeup.com, your personal website. Tell me a little bit about that.
Right. So I love writing, and I grew up in a family that absolutely cultivated my interest in writing. My dad is a beautiful writer, but English is my third language. But at the same time, when you're trained as a lawyer, you learn how to write, and I think I am relatively good at creative writing. But at the same time, because of my international upbringing, and I feel like I can provide a very different take on issues. And that's how I decided to write blog posts. And Ishakeup is just my way of sharing a bit side of who I am, and just writing very genuinely and authentically some of the challenges and adversity that I've gone through as an individual, a lawyer, so that people can find that resemblance and hopefully be inspired and to find that commonality in their stories and to say that, well, if she can do it, I can do it too. So yeah, so how that's how it, just like sharing my world, and especially how I was able to live in different parts of the world and lead with my curiosity and pursue my own fascinations on subjects that inspired me, and just be boldly and authentically share my own views on different subjects.
I think that's quite inspirational to share your own personal opinions, especially on such a public domain where people can be mean on the internet. I mean, that's just the reality. So when you're being authentic, when you're sharing who you really are, it can get so many positive responses, but also a lot of maybe negative or lukewarm ones.
Absolutely.
So how did you come up with this idea of the Own My Currency podcast?
As you said, when I was at Harvard, I was the first Uyghur, and while I take tremendous pride in being the first Uyghur to study at Harvard Law, it also is disheartening to know that um, that many girls from our community didn't even have a chance to pursue international education. So when I introduce myself to people like, "Oh, I'm Uyghur," um, not a lot of people know who we are. So sometimes I think you feel like you don't belong, not necessarily for Harvard Law, but it's um, it's just your process of your own identity crisis. But at the same time, there was something quite magical happen while I was there. So I took a course called Negotiation Strategy. It's one of the top courses at the law school. And while I was going through this, my own self doubt or imposter syndrome, however we frame it, during one of our classes, our professors asked us to do this exercise. So they draw a line and asked us if any of us who didn't feel like we belong here, we should cross the line. And I looked around, I was like, oh, like, okay, let me cross it. But so is everybody. Everybody felt the same way, but because we never engage, we are too fearful. And you always feel like you're alone. You're the only one who's feeling those quite negative feelings that not necessarily helpful in your own career advancement. So when I realized that, wow, like that is a whole new level of thinking that allowed me to look at things from a very different perspective. So we all have our own different life experience as to how we got to be how we are. But if we try so much time to fit in to the masses, we forgo the opportunity to embrace our unique personalities and our unique gifts that only we can offer to this world. And I think we would be doing so much disservice to ourselves and our stories. And having that realization as to you are just beautiful the way you are allowed me to come up with this idea that, our own individual experience, our upbringing, our education, um, our interaction with the world, all of that shape who we are. And that's such a beautiful thing to embrace it. And rather than trying to fit into somebody's notion of the best or the magnificent, we just need to own our stories and share it with the world rather than, trying to fit in, and rather be unique and extraordinary, because each one of us has so much beautiful stories and gifts to offer this world. So that is, and I define that as our currency. We are our own currency. So that is how the title came about.
Tell me a little bit about your own upbringing. What was it like to be you growing up?
Hmm. One. When I look back, about my upbringing, I I am so grateful to grow up in a family that valued so much of education. My parents really instilled this idea in me that I can do anything I want. So for that, I am incredibly grateful for my family. Um, but more than that, and you know, we often talk about our different roots and upbringing. I think my parents took parenthood very seriously. As I was growing up, like if I'm doing a homework, my parents would never watch TV. They would sit with me and they would work on their own job. Like my mom is a professor, so she would try to write on her own publications. Like she would write, and my dad, because he's such a beautiful writer, he would edit some of my mom's work. Um, I really loved that, just growing up in an environment where my parents made sure that learning is a lifelong process, that you have to continue to learn even when you are an adult or even you are quite into your seniority in life. So that is something that just growing up, and I hope it is a privilege that every kid had. So that's the kind of environment that I grew up, and I'm very grateful because not everybody get to have families who are incredibly supportive and be there for them.
I think that's a very lucky childhood, a positive environment. Um, Definitely is very conducive for growing up and being successful, being confident, and being able to approach life with a resilience, like you were saying.
Yeah, there's things that I'm incredibly grateful for my parents to cultivate, um, and allow me to flirt with my interests and provide platform where I can engage with my curiosity, especially when it comes to broadcasting. So even as a young child, like I was invited to be on a radio show where I would read stories for kids. My dad would record my voice several times and always ask me to speak slowly and clearly. That's why, like, it's very hard for me to speak quite fast. So, like those sort of support network was there, um, just from my parents. But it is a family, a typical middle class family that I grew up, where parents try to do everything they can to make sure that they provide a quite loving and supportive network for you.
So you're telling me you've had radio experience before.
Yes.
Um, this is a little more specific to the Uyghur community,
Hmm.
and I think a lot of people who have this third culture experience where there's the culture back home, there's the culture in the new land that you're in, and then there's the third culture where you are doing your best to reconcile the differences between the two so that you can live a life that's fulfilling in both areas. What what does it mean for you to be Uyghur?
Whenever I try to introduce people to Uyghur culture, the word comes to mind is we are very hospitable. Um, but hospitality means it's a generosity. and generosity leads to kindness. So we're incredibly kind people, but being Uyghur, especially growing up or in a more of a Uyghur culture, but at the same time having Western education, I do see some of the clashes. And for me, it was more so embracing the beauty within the Uyghur culture, but at the same time, allow myself, especially like I would call it my endearing heart, to engage with other cultures and to embrace the essence of those cultures and redefine what it means to be Uyghur for myself. Because it doesn't have to be either or. It could be a combination of so many things. And that's how we find our true voice. And everybody, we're come from such a diverse culture. Everybody had a completely different background, and we get to define who we are. So I truly allowed myself to challenge some of the cultural narratives or some of the presumptions that the society assumed for you, and to challenge that and find your own new identity. So for me, like that is what is being Uyghur in a Western world, if it makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, for this specific question, I find that it varies so much for so many people.
Mm-hmm.
There's never a wrong answer, and particularly when it comes to such a complex issue of identity,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that there's a bad answer either.
Yeah.
I think that we're individuals, and how we approach life is an individual thing.
And the beauty of exploring your identity, your own identity, is that I appreciate so many beautiful things in our culture more than ever because I explored other cultures. It's just like a very beautiful way of engaging with your own culture and appreciating it, and as well as showing deference to other cultures. And I think that is, for me, a true definition of Uyghur, because again, it comes down to that hospitality, right? Because when you're very hospitable, you're basically opening yourself up to somebody, which means you're also engaging with other cultures.
I want to talk about your time at Harvard Law.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think this is a pretty big part of your life, if I'm not wrong. And the fact that you were the first Uyghur to go to Harvard is definitely notable. Can you tell me a little bit about your time at Harvard Law School?
Yeah, I mean, so as I said, I got to the beauty of being at Harvard Law is that, you get to have this amazing opportunity to be, sorry, I have to respond to this very differently. I want to have a side note before talking to that, so that people wouldn't have this impression that, you need to go to Ivy League law school or university to have some good education. I do believe that, anywhere you go, you can make the best friendships and you can learn the best knowledge and be the best version of yourself. But at the same time, Harvard is, it's a beautiful place. And one thing I really enjoyed being there is to have this opportunity to explore subjects or be exposed to conferences in other departments like Harvard Kennedy School or business school, and get to interact with people who are going to be the shakers and movers of our society. So you get to meet amazing people and you build a network of friends who are so inspiring, and just engaging with them, learning from them. But at the same time, because everybody is so driven, um, you do feel a little bit, you experience all this imposter syndrome and all of that. But at the same time, for me, the most useful aspect of it is the after graduation. Like, even if you, like, I'm working in DC, but the alumni network is so huge here, and people go out of their way to help you because you are one of them. I'm sure other universities or law schools alumni network would offer the same kind of mentorship or friendship that I personally experienced. Um, but as a university, and in terms of the academic atmosphere, I was able to make some of my best friends at the law school, and also professors to date who would call me up and check up on me if I'm doing all right. Or whenever I have some sort of personal problems, I could still, rely on them to make sure I'm still on the right track. So for me, it's a, it embodies so many different things, the friendship aspect of it, and truly being inspired by some of my professors who are incredibly creative and so humble, down to earth, and caring, and they try to teach you to the best of their ability so that you could carry on their legacy, if I can frame it as such. So for me, I think those are the absolute beauty of what Harvard Law offered to me. But again, as I said, it comes with a sense of responsibility too. And I truly hope, the younger generation of Uyghur Americans here or other parts of the world would go to law school or like other Harvard departments, so we can create our own like Harvard Uyghur alumni network. So that would be beautiful.
Yeah, and I think that really ties in with ATILA. Would you say that that experience of having such a powerful network at Harvard of alumni, professors, all cooperating, working together, and collaborating was an inspiration for ATILA?
Yeah, I could definitely say that. And also it made me doubtless too. Like, I can achieve whatever I want. I just need to be very determined and committed to that vision.
Tell me a little bit about what your goals are, your short-term goals and your long-term goals.
So I used to make lots of plans in my life, and none of which actually turned out to be as I planned. So I decided that I just need to flirt and follow up with my curiosity. And, I never thought about, for instance, like entrepreneurship as something that I would get into. It was just me being able to have, as I said, a love affair with my curiosity and let me lead to an opportunity. So my goal right now is not to too much focus on what is going to be 5 years from now, but rather to understand and truly have a new agreement with the fact that we're graced with unlimited possibilities. And I just need to engage with my heart and also with my curiosity and allow them to lead me to whatever the next step is.
I think that's a pretty good answer in terms of it's less going with the flow, but
Mhm.
seeing where life takes you with a sense of ownership about it as well.
Absolutely. In fact, you framed it in such a beautiful way, and it is accurate representation of exactly what I said. But also, just to add to that, in terms of goal setting, I think I really want to encourage myself as well as others to dare to dream, because going back to this notion of we all have so much to offer to this world, and don't let doubt to kill your dreams, but rather believe in yourself. And that's something that in a philosophy I try to live by and embrace and constantly repeat to myself so that I can dictate to my brain that is a message and create this magic of believing.
Can you tell me if you have any role models?
So, I have several role models that a lot of people would, know. But but recently I came to terms with the fact that actually my best role model is my mother, and all this time that I didn't know. And I remember I was writing this like beautiful love letter to my mom and saying, because she knows that I look up to so many wonderful women like Michelle Obama, Oprah Winfrey. And I said, but above all, like you're the best role model and a woman. Such a class act, and you're just a, so graceful and beautiful soul. And I heard that she cried for the entire day from my dad. I hope it's true. In terms of role models that are like in my profession or people that inspired me are Justice Sonia Sotomayor, who is the Supreme Court Justice in the US. Perhaps because I'm an immigrant, I think Justice Sonia Sotomayor's story resonated with me on so many personal levels. And I just love that she's so vulnerable, and she often talks about some of her own insecurities and vulnerabilities that you wouldn't expect a sitting Supreme Court justice would share. So whenever I feel insecure or vulnerable, I always tell myself, be kind to yourself. You're allowed to feel those emotions. It's okay. And obviously, Michelle Obama, she's a wonderful person, and I love the fact that she was able to redefine what it means to be the first lady, and just allow us to see that role in such an iconic way. Um, and then entrepreneurs like Marie Forleo, who just built this entrepreneurship at such a young age, but at the same time did so well. And then the greatest thing about her is that she shares her knowledge and wisdom with the rest of the world.
What are your thoughts on mentorship?
So I love mentoring to begin with. I often receive emails from law students or lawyers who just started off their career to have a coffee or chat, or even somebody who's trying to enter into job market. So I absolutely love doing that personally. But at the same time, I also believe that you can find the best mentors, not necessarily like through personally reaching out. They are everywhere. They're the ones who are giving TED Talks, or writers, thought leaders that you can have access to just by buying their book or reading their autobiographies or just listening to their podcast, for instance, right? So and I'm telling you this because I think often I hear from girls that, oh, like I didn't have good mentor, that's why. I think that's an excuse, and we do have those mentors that are so accessible. We can easily reach out to them by just exploring how they get to where they are by reading about them.
You said that you believe mentorship comes in many forms,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's, a one-on-one coffee meeting, email exchanges, or even just a podcast. Is there a book that really resonated with you, whether or not it's related to mentorship, but something that taught you and made you grow as a person?
Yeah, so I love Marie Forleo's recent book, and I've been recommending to everybody, called Everything is Figureoutable. It's a philosophy that she lives by, and it's also a beautiful inspiration that, no matter what we're going through, we can all figure things out. So I really liked it. But the book is so unique in a sense that it provides concrete steps to cultivate that sort of mentality. This is another book that profoundly influenced me. I just keep listening to it because I bought the audio version and I love listening to audiobooks. It's called The Four Agreements, a practical guide to personal freedom, that is written by Don Miguel. The audio version was incredibly beautifully narrated, so I really enjoyed it. It teaches you a way to unlearn some of the agreements that you had with yourself that prevented you from personal growth, and then making a new agreement so that you can advance either in your career or in your personal life.
Yeah, those sound like very impactful books. And in the show notes, we'll put the name and the author up there as well, so that if people are interested in taking a read through these, they'll be able to find which book they were. If you could go back 10 years
Mhm.
and give yourself a piece of advice, what would it be?
Wow, that is such a profound question. I wish I've read more, to be honest. Don't get me wrong, I love watching shows, TV shows, and movies, but I think I read more now than ever before. And when you're younger, like when you're 19 or 20, you have more time to read, even at school. And oftentimes, I remember those days, I would have tons of shows that I need to watch or keep it in my calendar whenever a new episode gets produced. So while, I mean, those are, obviously, incredibly art that you need to know, I think the best knowledge you can learn is from reading. And, I wish I've done that more, not just the, subjects that I'm learning, like the law school subjects, but actually reading books that I'm reading now, like the Four Agreements, for instance. Those books were available a long time ago, especially like the Dale Carnegie's books and all of that. I've read it, but I've never read it so intentionally. Like, what am I learning? What is the purpose of this book? What am I trying to achieve? So I wish I was more living in the presence and having a sense of, let me truly pay attention to what I'm doing now and just, like live in the presence. And I think that's something that I didn't do.
Rayhan, is there anything that you wanted to say that you didn't get a chance to, or you felt that I didn't give you a chance to talk about?
I want to say, I know one of the key subjects that we talked about was, me going to Harvard Law. But I remember I want to talk about this experience or discussion that I had with one of my mentors at work. So I also learned, especially perhaps in America, this is heavily discussed topic. So I think sometimes when you go to schools like Harvard, you have a very conventional path. You go to a big law firm, or you may go to like a different public interest jobs. And sometimes if we didn't go to those schools, that doesn't mean that, you don't get to have the same experience or opportunities. My mentor said, because you don't have that conventional approach to success that these schools designed for you from day one, you get to explore your own path to success. So you become perhaps an entrepreneur, or you navigate a completely different path. So you become an innovator or disruptor. So I just want to have this conversation on this podcast, because sometimes I notice that people, pay too much attention to these titles rather than finding a different path to success with whatever resources that are available to them. You just need to embrace your own story and let the world to get to see that and be exposed to it and share your own wisdom and just be brave. But I know it's such a wonderful thing to do, be brave and courageous, and I struggle with that a lot. I don't say that lightly. It takes such a massive heart to do that. So something that I feel like, it's a hindsight wisdom that I learned over the years that I would love to leave it out there.
If people want to reach you, how can they do that?
Oh, they can find me on Instagram at Ishakeup-Rayhan. And on my website, I also have my email that if people want to, have a conversation about their career goals or some of the creative ideas they're exploring, or also engage with me and share their world, I always welcome it. And I have my email, info@ishakeup.com, and you can easily find it on my website.
I want to thank you, Rayhan, for coming on the show. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me and talk to the audience and share about your life, your personality, and the way you interact with the world. We really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. And thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to Tarim Talks, brought to you by the Tarim Network. Make sure you check out thetarimnetwork.com for more information about the Tarim Network and Tarim Talks, as well as seminars, classes, and ways to meet other Uyghurs around the world. If you'd like, you can also subscribe to this podcast through any major podcast supplier such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and more.